Everybody loves a fudge brownie, but sometimes the results can be dry and cakey. Hi, I'm Gemma Stafford, professional chef with over 20 years experience, and I went into my bold baking test kitchen and I came up with the perfect tips and formula for you at home to get fudgy brownies every time. So our first tip for a fudgy brownie, we're going to talk eggs. Eggs not only add moisture, but they also add fat, giving you a denser brownie. And here's a tip I just learned. Usually we say room temperature eggs when we're baking. Cold eggs give you a fudgy brownie, which is a fantastic tip. I never knew that. So the brownies I'm making are a 9 by 13 pan, which is really big, and we're just using 4 eggs. So you can use eggs, or even for even fudgier, you can use just yolks, and that will provide more fat, which will give you that moisture texture that we're looking for. This amount of eggs is the perfect amount to keep your brownie moist without giving you a dry, cakey crumb, which is what we're trying to avoid completely. Tip number 2, let's talk sugar. Now this is so important and actually really interesting. So I use a mix of white sugar and brown sugar. Brown sugar has more moisture than white sugar because if you've ever made my substitute for brown sugar, you know that it's plain sugar mixed with a little bit of molasses. The reason it's so sticky is because it has more moisture. That extra bit of moisture, rather than just using white sugar, makes a world of difference and gives you that dense texture. So here's the science around the sugar. You need a higher ratio of sugar compared to flour to give you that texture that we're looking for in the middle. In my recipe for best ever brownies, my sugar quantity is double the amount of flour, so you're getting extra fudge in there. And sticking on a scientific note, sugar actually attracts and binds moisture, so it's holding it in there for us. We always think about sugar adding sweetness, but for most of our recipes, it adds moisture and a lot more. Also, when it comes to brown sugar, I love to use a dark brown sugar, which means extra flavor, more molasses, more caramel tones. It really does make a difference to the flavor of your brownie. So our next tip is talking about the fat quantity. Fudge brownies rely on a high fat recipe. High fat to little flour. The rule is 2 times the amount of fat to 1 times the amount of flour. And you can use different fats. Lots of recipes call for different things. My best ever brownies call for melted butter, a lot of melted butter. I really like truly Irish butter that's imported into America, and I use salted for that extra bit of flavor. One of the reasons for using melted butter is that when your brownies are baked and they have set and chilled, the butter will solidify, giving you that firm fudge brownie. That's something you can really bite into. My recipe to introduce even more fat is to add 2 tablespoons of oil. Now, when I'm talking fat, I'm not just talking butter and oil, I'm also talking melted chocolate. So if your recipe calls for melted chocolate, that's still another addition of fat, so remember that. So why am I using 2 oils? It's a very good question. Unlike butter, oil is 100% fat. Butter contains water, and oil actually will prevent gluten formation, giving you a more tender brownie, which is really something that we want with a fudge brownie. You can use vegetable oil, coconut oil. What I like to do is actually use a little bit of olive oil, which adds extra flavor and is really good quality. After the fat, I add in a little bit of salt and vanilla extract. These are both for flavor. They don't contribute to the texture, just to the yummy flavor. With a hand whisk, we're just going to whisk all these ingredients together. You want everything in the one place here. So tip number 4, we are moving on to flour. And you've already heard me say this when it comes to the sugar and the butter. We want minimal amount of flour to give you a fudge brownie. Too much flour causes too much texture, too much structure, and we don't want that. We want it to remain, firm, but with a soft bite. A small amount of flour ensures that your brownies remain dense. So the flour that we want to use is unbleached all-purpose flour. So all-purpose will provide structure, but it won't make them airy and it won't make them tough. Here's the thing we don't want. You're probably thinking, well, then why don't I use cake flour? Because that makes everything soft. And it's like, yes, it does make everything soft, but it'll make it cakey and it'll make it light. So we don't want that. We want to have that little bit of structure. Now, do not add bread flour either because it has too much protein in it. Now, if you're an avid baker and have a digital scale, you know that accuracy is important when it comes to our recipes. So if you really want to get that perfect ratio, use one of these guys. On biggerbolderbaking.com, for all of my recipes, I give cups, grams, and ounces because I live in America, but I used to live in Ireland. In Europe, we use grams and ounces. Here we use cups. I want to make sure everybody has access to my recipes. So sticking in the flour realm, let's talk about cocoa powder in brownie recipes. I think it's really important for a fudge brownie, but using cocoa powder takes up some space that you might have used for all-purpose flour, giving you less structure, less gluten. When it comes to cocoa powder, please use good quality and use unsweetened. That's really important. So now let's talk raising agents, or lack of. For a fudge brownie, we do not want raising agents in there. Your recipe shouldn't call for them, because what happens is they create air bubbles. You know, they start a chemical reaction, they create air bubbles, and those air bubbles make your brownie texture cakey and light, and we don't want that. We want it dense. So in the world of brownies, if you want a fudgy brownie, no leavening agent. If you are a cakey brownie person, and I do have cakey brownies and chewy brownies on biggerbolderbaking.com, for cakey, your recipe will call for raising agent. It's really important. But right now, see you later. So tip number 6 is mixing, and you want minimal mixing. So you do not mix it on a stand mixer. Do it by hand with a whisk. Mix it until it's just combined, there's no lumps, and then stop. Over mixing will create air bubbles, and it will whip up the eggs too much where it starts to become really cakey. Now, if you've seen my video for chewy brownies, we whip and whip and whip and whip to get that texture and to get a cakey brownie. So we do not want to do that here. We're also not trying to develop gluten here. So that's it. We've got all our ingredients in there. Get it into your 9 by 13 pan. Reminder, this is my best ever brownie recipe. It's called best ever for a reason. I don't hand out that title lightly. And when it's baked, you will see why. To finish, I scatter some chocolate on top. Okay, we have done everything we possibly can do to give us the best fudgy brownies. Let's get them into the oven and wait and see. So while the brownies are baking, I'm gonna cover some questions that we got to the Bold Baking hotline. Kim Hollenbeck asked a really good question. Can you freeze brownies once they're baked, and when and for how long? So all the brownie batches that I have here today are all going in my freezer, because I have a 6-year-old and we have friends over and picnics and parties and all those things. Bake your brownies. You can put them in an airtight container, put parchment between each layer, and they can be frozen for up to 8 weeks, if not longer. Brownies defrost beautifully. If you want, you can warm them through in the oven or the microwave for a little bit, but honestly, you can defrost them at room temperature and eat them, and they will be perfect. This next question is a fantastic one and really important. They ask, can I change the size of my baking pan? I'm doing 9 by 13. Maybe you want to use that in an 8 by 8. Can you? Yes, you can, but you have to factor in a time change. Now you've got more batter in a smaller pan. They're going to take longer to bake. This next question came in. I thought it was a really good one to follow that. Every time I bake my brownies, the edges end up crispy but raw in the middle. How do I fix this? So timing is everything. I bake my best ever brownies at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. And what we're looking for is a jiggle in the middle. Maybe it might look like it's raw in the middle, but once it sets and goes cold, they're really fudgy. So let me show you exactly what I mean by that. Let's go into the oven. And that last question brings me to tip number 7. Baking time. This is so important. When it comes to brownies, what you're looking for is that jiggle in the middle. Now, what that means is that when you shake the pan, the batter in the middle, the edges are kind of set, but it's still a bit wobbly in the middle. And if you put your finger, it feels soft underneath your finger. What that means is that we've got a little bit baked around the outside, but as you get to the center, it's more and more moist, less baked, more fudge. The thing about it is when you take it out of the oven, that jiggle will disappear as the brownies sit. They cool down at room temperature and they will set. Remember that butter that we put in there? That's all going to solidify when this goes cold. So you have to factor in that once you take them out of the oven, they're still going to continue to bake for a few more minutes out of the oven because of the eggs and all those things. Factoring all that in and just knowing what to look for, that jiggle will give you the perfect texture. And can I give you a little tip actually that I just started doing recently and I found works really well. Once I bake a batch of brownies, I do it the day before I need them. Once they're cooled, I put them into the fridge, take them out the next day, and it is just solid fudge. So don't be afraid to bake them the day before. The flavor will be better and the texture will be better. Okay, so this is the moment of truth in the video. I have some fudge brownies that I made that have set. I have some cakey brownies and I have some chewy brownies. Let's go see if there's a real difference and see if all the tips that I did really worked. So here we have it, folks, the final reveal. And guess what? My fudgy formula worked. These look absolutely fantastic. We have a cakey one here that you can see has more flour, has more air, and it's more like a cake-like structure. Over here, we have chewy. Chewy has been mixed more and it's a little bit tougher because we mixed all the ingredients harder. It also can contain raising agents. In the middle is our hero, absolute ultimate fudgy brownie. All of those tips added up to the perfect fudgy formula. The next time you go to make your brownies, if you use all of my tips, you will get the perfect fudgy formula every time, no matter what brownie recipe you use. I hope you enjoyed this video of breaking down exactly what gives you a fudgy brownie. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back here again, same time, same place next week.